Welcome to the Penguin Official Podcast. I'm your host, film critic Amy Nicholson. After each show episode, we are summoning the creators, writers, directors, cast, and crew into our studio to hear more about the marvelous horrors they have unleashed. There will be spoilers, and we will be getting into them with no mercy. In episode 7, it is endgame time, as Oz, Sophia, and Sal make their final moves against each other. But first, we have to learn a horrible secret about Oz's past. We see young Oz as an awkward kid. We meet his brothers, and we learn why Oz flinched in episode 5 while exploring the old trolley tunnels with Vic when he looked at one particular sewer door. Turns out he trapped something in there long ago, something bleak, in the darkest tunnels of his memory. Our first guests with me today are writer and co-executive producer Vladimir Cvetko, who returns along with Kevin Bray, who directed episodes 6 and 7. Greetings, gentlemen. I'm glad you guys are both here for episode 7.
Happy to be here. Thanks
Me
for having
too.
us.
Nice to meet you.
Wow, we have to start here talking about episode 7 with this flashback to young Oz at home. I mean, tell me about this kid. What did you guys really want to get across about Oz's formative years? Let me throw that question actually to you, Vladimir.
For Oz, going into his backstory, one of our goals was to establish the relationship with his mother and Frances and understand their dynamic in a deeper way. And some of the challenge of doing this was finding the right tone for this moment that changed everything for Oz and Frances. We really wanted to be delicate with it because it's a really horrendous act. And we still wanted to be able to convey that young Oswald is a human underneath all of this. And so, and that's tricky because like in the Batman world, like he's a villain. And so like we were trying to humanize this villain. And so we really wanted to give life to this transformational moment and not have it be arch or so horrendous that you just like hate him. We wanted you to kind of feel him and understand him and know like how this is the kernel of everything that he is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that idea of the humanness of him in these sequences, just the idea of a kid who can't play with his brothers, I guess it hadn't really hit me how not being able to move, not being able to play would keep him separate from his family, from being able to run around in the living room.
Yeah, I think that's part of what draws him to Frances also is that as much as she tries, and you hear it in her tone of voice when she's like, Oz, get up, go. Like, go outside. Like, the exercise is good for you. There's something that I think we'll probably end up coming back to that we wanted Frances to never allow Oz to use his disability as a crutch and to always have him be strong and to move past it and use it to his benefit. But it is isolating, like and so he'll never be the same as his brothers. And so there's an inherent jealousy of just his situation that's there.
Well, Kevin, there's a moment I really want to drill into because we finally get to see the much-hyped Rex Calabrese in this episode. And from the way that Oz has been describing him, from his first scene, episode 1, I was kind of expecting the Pope, especially when he described his car a couple episodes ago. But Rex, as we meet him, as you direct him, he's not the Pope. And I know that we should not be trusting anything that Oz says, but I really want to believe in Rex and to believe in this idea that there is a good way to go about being a gangster. But instead, what we really see is like, his older brother sees Rex for who he is. Oz comes across really kind of naive and superficial. Tell me more about this moment.
In regards to Rex, I kind of think that my presentation came from the text that I had in 107. So I was trying to give you Rex in the moment of what the pages were telling me he was. I wasn't working with the backstory or anything. I just wanted this vicious dude who cut a mean silhouette and was, not cliched. And I think as a team in casting, we kind of went for this somewhat attractive individual, very attractive, I guess you'd say, and virile and vital, and not your fat cat dude. He's still got the cigar and he's still striking the pompadour, but a new yuppie gangster, I guess, from 1987 in a weird way.
Yeah, Louis Cansave is the actor, right? There's something about him where the first image in my head was, oh, he's like a switchblade.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, a lot of angles to that guy, a lot of sharp edges to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin did a great job also setting up the difference between Jack and Oz in that moment. But just kind of to speak to what Oz is seeing in Rex, is we had a lot of conversations in the writers' room about Oz's father and who he is, and I don't need to go into like detail about that and what we kind of landed on, but he essentially is not a role model. Like, he's not a strong father figure. And so you have the difference between these two boys where Jack took on the role of being the father, right? Which is something that Oz is jealous of because that's a connection with Francis. And then you have Oz, who's kind of working kind of with his own physicality, and the things that he's come to respect are money and power and flash, because that to him is like, it's a tangible item to him. It's a way out of things. But one of the things that we wanted to do was that in our research, and I can't remember where it was, but there was a gangster who was talking about how they recruited young kids, and said we would always look for kids that didn't have fathers, people that didn't have role models, so that we could fill that role of being that role model, and then that would endear this loyalty to us. And that's what we wanted to get from the Oz side. So to him, I mean, I would push back a little on naive, because I think he knows exactly what he's looking for. Like, that is it. It's a real thing to him to have power and respect. And at the end of that teaser, it's a powerful move that he does, not saying that his brothers are in trouble. Like, that's his first instance of making a power move in a way.
Well, so then let's get into really the darkest part of this episode, the tunnel scene. I mean, Vladimir, do you think that Oz locked his brothers up just to teach them a lesson in the moment? Is this impulsive? Did he know that things are going too far? Or does he really deeply know what he's doing? Like, this is how I will become my mom's number one boy, by being an only child by default.
Well, see, I think that second version, I think, is very arch, right? Like, it's like, I'm gonna lock my brothers up, I'm gonna kill them, I'm gonna go home to mom, and I think that version, and we talked about this a lot, is Oz born this way, and then we're just gonna see him act out on it, or do we want to see it develop? And so what we were trying to do was develop that moment where Oz turns from a kernel inside him to becoming the villainous boy that he is. So to me, he locks his brothers in out of anger and frustration, right? But it's a deep-seated anger and frustration. And then we have him walking home in the rain, where it's like your first instance of, oh my God, they could be in trouble. And he ignores it. He stuffs it down, right? And then he gets home, and now it's like, oh, I got mom all to myself. And then I think he does such a great job too in the bathroom, where he's like lying, but he's lying like on cue in the moment. And you see that thing that's like a really like versatile thing for adult Oz, is that he's able to pick up on something in the moment and adapt and move past it. So I think, to me, he made an impulsive choice, and he had to navigate the consequences, and he felt powerful in that moment. And then we see him turn darker and darker as he ignores the rain outside and watches the show and snuggles into his mom as his brothers are drowning. And so I think we had an opportunity to kind of live through that entire moment of his turn towards darkness. And also, just to say, like, there's a thing, and we try to a lot to mirror in the season, mirror different moments. And if you do look at it, like, he makes an impulsive decision, and he has to deal with the consequences as a young child. And that's the opening of the show too. He makes an impulsive decision. He shoots Alberto, and then has to deal with the consequences. And so there's a bit of, it's his rhythm, right? It's just like, he loses control and he's mad, and now he's like, oh, how do I have to make the best out of this, right? So, yeah.
He's like the living embodiment of that. I'm reaping, I'm reaping, I'm reaping. Oh no, I'm sowing, I'm sowing, I'm sowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Kevin, talk to me about directing this trio of young actors in this tunnel scene.
It was incredibly intimidating because it was three young actors, but on the day and when we got there, we were just gifted with very talented, mature, creative kids. You know, sometimes you rehearse a scene, you're getting ready to shoot it, you have to shoot it in about 45 minutes or maybe a couple hours after you've lit the thing, and you have to do some real modeling and tailoring to get it where you want. These kids came together and they just were natural together, and you just felt it. You mentioned this moment, which is incredibly cruel, but I don't think that Oz had an intention of taking his brothers out in that moment. I think it's we've all known that child as a child. We've known the child that just strikes too hard or hits somebody with something and never thought the consequences would cut them open and they'd have to go get stitches. And he didn't have the impulse control, to think this through. But shooting that moment, because of the authenticity of the kids acting, I think it got to all of us. It really did. Remember when we did the shots of the kids down in the?
Oh yeah.
It got to
I
you?
mean,
It got to you? Like, how?
we're just like, are we? Is this really happening? Are we doing this? Like, this is the imagery was very powerful. On the monitors when we would shoot the two, the older and younger brother stuck. The shots that were down. Come on, Oz, let us out. Let us out. It functioned on a very visceral level without having been edited together, just as a moment. These images were very strong and frightening.
Let us out! Please let us out, please! We're trapped down here! Help! Please! Get us out of here!
Yeah, I mean, people can't see Vladimir's face like I can, but you look guilty, almost complicit, almost. Like, there's some genuine emotion here.
I mean, that, Kevin reminded me of how that felt like when we were doing that. Because we had, these tunnels, and so we built that little overflow tank for Jack and Benny. And then, we just had them hollering for their dear lives down there. And we had real water gushing in over them. And,
real water?
Yeah, and so... and it felt like it was terrifying, and it was incredibly terrifying, and, just watching it on a monitor, but it was really good. So,
I mean, this title here of this episode, Top Hat, it comes from a Fred Astaire movie that Oz is watching with his mother as his brothers are drowning. This whole show, I've been looking at Oz in this face, and I've been thinking he looks like this world-weary man. But in this episode, especially in this moment, watching him watch Fred Astaire in his fancy tux with the top hat, it suddenly felt like this episode was a lens into these little kids' eyes, that so much of adult Oz turns out to be what he thought was really cool when he was a boy.
From my point of view of being the director who comes in to direct 2 episodes, who has not been in the writer's room, the wonderful things that I saw were the subtext that was bubbling up, and also a lot of the meta information that I thought just kind of like, wow, this is nodding to Batman the TV show. But then just emotionally, there's a story that Michael Jackson used to look at the socks and shoes of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly. And so that's kind of like what I feel like young Oz is doing in that moment, is he's building this kind of larger than life character. And this is stuff that he may not even know that he's attracted to later as he starts to become, this force that he becomes as an adult. So, yeah, I thought that was a lovely, lovely sequence.
It embodies so much of what we want out of Oz. One, it's that, like, callback to, like, the tuxedo and the kind of umbrella-like cane and the top hat.
It's kind of cheeky.
Yeah, it's cheeky, but it's also like classic Penguin, right? Like, it's like Penguin from the canon, right? Like of Batman.
The Burgess Meredith Penguin.
Yeah. And then there's also kind of like a weirdness in, like, this boy that has a bad leg and like idolizing a tap dancer too, right? And like you're like, oh, like, and then there's that moment where he's shooting down his like enemies and stuff. You're like, oh, it's so gangster. Like, it was just so meta the way it all like came together. And then it's over this kind of jubilant like tune, and it's so creepy as his brothers are dying. I mean, I think the whole thing was just like, it was perfect, man.
I think that might be the most sinister moment. He's got to be thinking about his brother's well-being, and he's watching people get killed, and he's smiling. And so it's pretty chilling that that's where he's able to find joy in the same moment that his brothers are floating away.
Kevin, I want to ask you a question that has, I think, a lot of technical elements to it, which is, what is your approach to directing episodes that have really significant flashback scenes? I mean, how do you like to work? Do you even think of it as though you're making a period piece inside of an episode?
Absolutely. I had some experience with that when I first started directing television. I worked on the show Cold Case, and every episode we had to make a little period film. And so there was, how are we going to photograph this, and what medium are we going to use to do it? Because we've got to get back to 1946. How are we going to dress these people, and how are we going to approach the way they behave with each other? And I had that in my quiver. And we're doing a lot of acrobatics in regards to the way that the show is shot, because Craig, the initial first episode director, had established a style to the show that was different from the movie, but at the same time feel like it could be from the world of the movie, maybe coming out of Oz's point of view with a little bit more handheld, a little bit more chaos, a little more boots on the ground vibe. So one of the things was, where we're shooting this show like this, so how now do we turn 180 degrees to take us back in time? And I thought, well, let's get a little bit more formal. And it does feel like, the films that we know of the 80s were a little bit more formal. You're coming out of everyone being in love with Martin Scorsese and Michael Cimino and all these great 70s filmmakers, or Mike Nichols, where the camera's moving in very elegant ways. So I think that was one of the things, to get on longer lenses and get some distance and some kind of almost like a voyeuristic, because most of the time your memories, they become more stylish, for lack of a better description. And I think that was something that maybe, if I'm not doing it consciously, I'm certainly doing it subconsciously, because it's very fun to watch the episode now in the way that it's ended up and being edited together. And those moments on the street, I think, really accomplished a quick way of taking us back. Just background stuff, just little details, signage and the cars. And, actually one of our touchstones was, for me, I don't know if I mentioned it, but there's a little bit of Do the Right Thing in there.
Wait, there's a little bit of Do the Right Thing in here?
I think so. There's so much pedestrian behavior in Do the Right Thing, walking up the street talking, groups of kids, Spike walking with his boys, with Giancarlo. And I'm not saying I put the Laserdisc on and watched it, but it's definitely in my card catalog of imagery. So, you want to get people back as soon as possible. And this is a teaser too. Yeah.
Guys, it has been really great, though, talking to you about episode 7. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
You too. Nice meeting you. Thanks for having us.
Next up, I'm joined by series creator, executive producer, and showrunner Lauren LeFranc, and Clancy Brown, who plays Salvatore Maroni. Hello.
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 Clancy, I want to start with you. You have played many legendary hardasses. I'm just going to name 2 for the benefit of the people listening at home. Captain Hiley in The Shawshank Redemption, Drill Sergeant Zim in Starship Troopers. Is it weird to think of Sal as one of your nicer characters?
Oh, well, Zim saved the universe, man. He was okay. Yeah, Hadley was a son of a bitch, though. Yeah, no, I don't think Sal's very nice. I don't think anybody in this show is very nice, to be honest with you. Sal's very emotional, but he's not a nice man. I mean, you can disagree if you want to, Lauren, but he's a mobster, and all he wants to do in this show is kill Oz, and he doesn't like Oz, and he's never liked Oz, and he kind of hates him in a hateful way. Yeah, he's not nice. What makes you think he's nice? I mean, just because he loves his wife and he loves his right. So
you're one of my only bright spots of love, so I wanted to cling to it.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, Tony Soprano loved Carmela. He protected her and kept her, but he was not a nice guy, and I don't think mobsters are nice guys.
Yeah, nice is a relative term.
He's
maybe better than other people who don't love their families.
Yeah. He does love his family.
Yeah.
He's madly in love with his wife, actually, and his son, and would kill for them, and wants to.
Yeah, we've had Shore on the show, and I can really see why.
Yeah,
I'm in love with her already.
Yeah. I was in love with her years ago.
But But I did have a thought in this episode that it feels like only in 7 am I really, really, really getting to see who Sal is, because you've been locked up, you've been gut shot, and only in episode 7 are you finally free and healthy enough to swing a golf club. Be scary. How was that scene for you?
Well, actually, when we shot it, I was a little too enthusiastic, apparently.
What?
I was told to back off a little bit because I was kind of pounding on Colin too much. The golf club, because I don't play golf. I don't know anything about a golf club. And Colin's like encased in his fat suit, and so I just kind of assumed that he was already padded up, and we had a good stunt coordinator, and he was going to pad him up. And so I just kind of wailed on him, and finally he pulled me aside. I said, "Okay, you got to take it easy. Maybe don't go that far." So we backed over, which is the right thing to do anyway. You can do a little more nuance with a beating. It's not all Captain Hadley beating someone to death. I'm not beating him to death. I just want him to hurt. So
No, but it does feel like you come close.
Right, and they have to stop me. They have to stop me a few times. I mean, that's what I mean about him being emotional. He's lost his anchor after Nadia is killed, and so he's just ready to go, kill anybody, kill Oz.
Well, and there's some interesting layers in there and how close he comes. Lauren, it's Sophia's men who step in, and
Right.
it kind of adds to this dimension of who's in
Exactly.
charge. And it also made me wonder, how long has it even been for Sal since he was that kind of hands-on man? Because I would imagine bosses don't usually do most of their violent, dirty work.
No, but I think this is a situation where Sal would desperately want to himself. It's too personal what Oz did. And if there's any sort of mob code, it's that you typically do not go after family. You don't go after other people. You handle it amongst yourselves. So, Oz, in that sense, also is so low that he betrayed that. But I think Sal and Sophia, have an understanding and a mutual respect for their hatred of the Falcones in their way, and their hatred of Oz, certainly. And so I think they've previously made an agreement that, yes, Sal should hurt Oz. That is the plan, but they need things from him. So it's not that he shouldn't kill him. I think Sal and Sophia desperately both want to kill Oz. It's the not yet, because we need to get his drug operation that they both feel they're more deserving of than him. They need to take from him, and they want him to suffer as well. And yet Sal is a very emotional man, and it's hard to feel logic in a situation like that, given that what Oz just did to his wife and child, and how brutal it was too.
Yeah.
Well, and his loyalty to Sophia is interesting in this episode because Oz tries to drive a wedge between them by saying that Sal alone can take over the drug operation, can take all of the bliss, and Sal doesn't take the bait. And I wanted to ask you both why.
I mean, he's a scumbag. I mean, I'm not going to believe anything or don't want to believe anything he says. The only thing I want to do is light him on fire. I mean, that's really it.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of not betraying her. It's a matter of just one step at a time. I think if it had gone on and they had killed Oz and things had gone on differently, then I don't know. It would have been a battle between Sophia and Sal. I mean, she's a lot smoother. She might have been able to talk him down, but I don't think they're partners.
No, but the way I'm hearing you say he just wants to kill him. Oh, Sal just wants to kill Oz.
Yeah.
Oh, Sal just wants to kill Oz. When you're in these scenes looking at Oz, are you the type of actor who has that thought running through, like, I just want to kill this guy? Or how do you like to work?
No, I mean, I don't hate Colin or anything. I didn't, as an actor, imagine that I hated him and hated him and hated him. I mean, it was all in the script. It was all what Lauren had written. Do you have to get to a point where you understand the beats and how it gets there? And I mean, he's frustrated. They set it up so that there's a build, and so when Oz is finally talking about her hair, I didn't expect that. Did she use something in her hair? And the smell, the manipulation that the gambit that Oz does there at the end to set Sal off. I mean, we see that he's been suppressing it and suppressing it and suppressing it, and then and then that just sets him off. I mean, who could stop at that point?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish I did want to set him on fire at that point. I wish I could. I wish I could have doused him, but we couldn't douse him. And I wish I could have put the, lighter up next to him, but we couldn't do that.
We literally couldn't.
We literally
douse
couldn't.
Oz's
we couldn't douse
body.
What, his makeup is flammable?
Well, we can't get it wet.
Wow, it's like a gremlin. Well, Lauren, Sal and Nadia's relationship, it almost feels like polar opposite of Carmine and Isabella as we learn about their relationship in an earlier episode. Sal and Nadia, they run this family together. The Falcons were just sort of ruled by Carmine alone. That was definitely not an equal relationship. Was this an intentional decision going back in the writer's room to kind of juxtapose these two families?
Yeah, definitely. We talked a lot about that, of how do you differentiate these two families that, are well known in Gotham and, have been around for a long time. And it made a lot of sense, I think, based on what we knew of Carmine and the way that the Falcons ran things and, the absence of Carmine and what that meant to the Falcons and seeing them scramble a bit, because I think Carmine made it so there's not an easy person to replace him. He had a lot of control. And that Nadia and Sal, and seeing how the Maronis are, they just are loyal to each other and they value family more than anything. And of course, if you go against that family, that's it. But there is real loyalty there, whereas the Falcons betray each other left and right. And you can feel sort of the difference there. And I think that's maybe why you felt more of a connection to Sal and Nadia, because people understand that, if nothing else, doesn't mean that what they do isn't just as despicable, but they do have some sort of moral code to them that the Falcons don't seem to have in that same way.
I mean, did you two have any conversations about Sal's life before this, Sal's backstory before the Penguin starts?
We had coffee.
Yeah, I remember you talked about the scene, the cooking scene, and that was kind of emblematic of the difference between the two families.
And knowing, that Sal always was a family man, that he fell in love with Nadia, that, she came from Iran, and that there's that sort of difference as well, that I think there's something inherently different in a character who, what you've, I guess, traditionally seen in the Italian mob is if you're Italian, you stay and, you marry an Italian. That's just what you do. So there's something inherently different about a character who falls in love with someone who's not Italian and that then brings that culture into their own culture, and that just a mixed family, which I always thought was interesting and fascinating to have. And I think that speaks a lot about who Sal is and who Nadia is as well.
Well, what does it say? That he's rebellious, that he's curious, that he's hungry for something bigger than this world?
I think that, without this sounding cheesy, that love matters to him, and that doing right by whatever the family traditionally would do isn't the most important to him, and that there's a brazenness to it, that he can do what he wants and he can be with who he wants, and he'll make his family a mixed family, and that there's strength in that as well. I think that makes him a different sort of man than we may have seen in previous iterations of Salvatore Maroni.
Yeah, and we all know the Italian mafia mob language. We all know that as viewers and everything, and what a fun thing to mix it up by throwing in another country, by throwing in the part of the world that the Romans couldn't conquer. Was the Persian civilization. They couldn't get past them, and it's a long time coming to get the Romans and the Persians together. And
oh, I like that subtext.
Right? I mean,
you just made everybody 5 IQ points smarter with that. Thank you.
That's the genius of
it's power.
Lauren
It's power
LeFranc,
together.
right? She could have picked any country, but she picked Iran.
Well, I want to talk about the big last fight between Sal and Oz. I thought the one thing that felt really unique about it, watching it, is that neither of the characters in the scene is necessarily, an action star. You're older, you're recovering from a gut wound. Oz doesn't move very well, even in his best days, even when he was young. So tell me about choreographing this.
Stephen Pope is our stunt coordinator, and Kevin Bray directed this episode. We scripted it this way. Vladimir Cvetko wrote this episode, and we talked a lot in the writer's room about just making sure that it felt like a brawl, that it was messy between these two men, that no one was an action star, and that it felt just more realistic. And so we wrote that into the script. You know, I think it's important when you're writing stunts, for me personally, to express on the page what you're wanting out of it. You know, it's like we really carved out all the different details. That was really important. And also knowing that Sal wasn't going to make it through this fight, and not because Oz kills him, but to try to make it more surprising. I think it's always interesting also to sort of, you know, challenge ourselves as writers. Like, what haven't you seen before? Like, what's the thing that's unexpected? And what makes it a little bit peculiar or a little bit off kilter? Honestly, a little funny too, because it's just in the reaction that Oz might have, but then also expressing something about Oz in terms of what he does after that. And then you experienced, Clancy, just how it was blocked and what it was like actually doing that.
Yeah, no, it was put together precisely as you said. You know, it's always great to have a very specific script and description of what you're going through, and also the motivations to get to the fight, because as you said, they're not action stars. These guys aren't guys that would, you know, they would point to somebody else to go kill them. They would point to their second. They would have somebody else do the job. But at that moment, Oz is running for his life, and Sal just wants to tear his head off. I mean, it's primal. It's a primal thing, and it doesn't matter how out of shape or how crippled or how old you are. Once you see red in that way, either in self-defense, which is where Oz is, and just in fury where Sal is, you know, it's just got to go. So as nice as the description was, the abandon was something that the coordinator was really working with. And also I have to give credit to Colin. Colin really had specific ideas of where the ins and outs, the dramatic ups and downs of the fight should go, and who's in control and who's not in control, and what finally happens at the end and how it happens. And then Kevin was really good at seeing what he was given and, you know, taking this out and putting that in, and then putting his camera where it was most effective. I mean, it was fun. It was really fun to do, because
I wanted to ask if
there
you
was
like
some
these
real
kind
creative.
of days on sets.
Oh yeah, there's some great creative angles and creative shots. Could have been a little lighter for my taste, but I'm an old man. I'm going blind, you know. But Colin's great. He's game for anything.
I mean, when you go down, he seems almost disappointed. You know, like he's defined by opposition. He's always got to be fighting someone.
Oz is an American. He wants to win, and he wants to win on his terms, and he wants everybody to know it. That's why he throws the body out, you know. He throws the body out, for crying out loud. They couldn't have been easy. He throws the body out where everybody can see it.
But then, Lauren, tell us about the decision to have Sal go out, not necessarily by Oz's hands, but by a heart attack.
Yeah,
Genius.
It just felt fun. It felt like a fun thing to do. Fun's probably not the right word. I use fun a lot in very dark ways too. I just am like, that's fun, and it's actually a very dark moment in the show. It just felt a little bit more surprising, you know, to have these two fight, and I think, you know, interesting too that I think Sal was winning. You know, Sal was really giving Oz a beating. You know, but Sal is under stress. We very subtly establish in 105, Sal takes medication, you know, little things that we've tried to hint at but are not very overt, but that you could believe that this is something that would actually happen because of the stress of losing his wife and his son, because of this physical altercation that is not easy for either man to engage in, and that Sal is so close to getting what he wants and he can't have it. And then I think it spoke also to Oz's reaction to something like that. What Oz's reaction would be was very interesting to me. And the fact that, you know, it's contained. No one is seeing this happen. So that then you sense Oz's delusion, right? He's talking to a dead man, and then he shoots him anyway because he wanted to shoot him, because he wanted to. And so he got what he wanted, and he made that happen, even though it's not actually the way he imagined it. I think that highlights a lot about who Oz is as a character. And then to what Clancy's saying, he throws the body out and then takes credit. Like, I killed him, I did it. And from that point on, in Oz's mind, he killed Sal Maroni. Like, there is no other alternative. No one else is going to know that Sal died on his own. Like, that. This is part of Oz's constructed narrative.
Well, Clancy, I want to give you the last word on this then.
No, don't give me last word. No,
No,
give
You
Warren
got
the
it,
last
Clancy.
word.
No.
It's too late. It's coming at you. It's coming at you like a golf club to the head. How do you think Sal would have preferred to go if he had any say in the matter?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think he thought about it. I think he wants to, he'll kill Oz. His plan is, it's right in front of his face. It's one step at a time. He'll kill Oz. He'll take over the shit from Sophia. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have the thing that he values the most. He doesn't have Nadia, and he doesn't have his son. And I don't know. What do you do when you're old and it's over that way? You sort of, you're at the summit of all the stuff that you thought was important, but then the most important people are not there. I don't know.
Some people marry a younger woman. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I don't think
maybe.
he's that guy. Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, with time.
But there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of grief, big grief going on. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's an existential
maybe
thing.
a broken heart is fine.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this game is like a young man's game in a lot of ways. And you have the endurance it takes and what you're fighting for. And because the Maronis are so much about family, I think Sal's drive has always been based on, he wants to get out. He's in Blackgate. He's been in prison in Blackgate for years and years. He wants to be with his family. He wants to cook that meal with them that he cooks with Sophia. And he doesn't get to now. So I think Sal is in a place where he's thinking, just as you said, with Red, like he's just so rageful and just wants to get Oz. And after that, who knows? So I don't know how Sal would want to go out.
I think eventually he'd just die of a broken heart anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, he sort of does that because you're such a softie. You're such a softie. It's like you can't let Oz kill him. He has to die of a broken heart.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah, poor Sal. Poor Sal Maroni.
Oh, well, thank y'all so much for being here.
All right. Yeah,
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
For having us.
Now it is time to speak with our composer, Mick Giacchino. Hey, Mick, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad. I mean, you and your father, Michael Giacchino, you worked together on the score for The Penguin, but I have actually heard somebody very in the know about the show refer to you as the driving force. So I want to learn more about your collaboration, but first, let me jump back in time to The Batman because you worked on that score too, yes?
Yeah, so actually I did two things on that movie. I scored the car chase, and then I also did the string overlay for Something in the Way at the end of the film.
Oh, interesting. So,
Yeah.
wow, so you scored the car chase that has the penguin in it.
Yeah.
So you've been thinking penguin for a minute.
That was my first encounter with Oz, I guess you would say.
So then I'm wondering, was anything in the Batman score a starting point for working into the penguin?
Yeah, so I think from the beginning, something that I know my dad and I always talked about, because he's very much served as like a score producer role, and his job was to make sure that the film felt connected to the show in some way while the show still has its own identity. I think the way that we talked about doing that was making sure that we have some form of a live orchestra, and in this case, it was focusing on the strings, because the Batman, there's a lot of brass, but there's also a lot of strings as well. And so from the beginning, kind of the conversations was this show should feel like a demented cousin from the film.
A demented cousin.
A demented cousin. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been calling it, at least. So that it's like, it's related, but it's got its own thing going on.
Tell me then about making that score demented. What does that mean? What does that sound like?
It's a lot of half steps and a lot of clusters and stuff that isn't really tonal or supposed to sound nice together. One of my starting points, there was a scene in episode 1 initially when Oz, after killing Alberto, has to, he's hopping on the different subways and trying to get out of town with Vic. There initially was a violin busker playing violin that they wanted to try having a piece for that was written. So I wrote something, just a violin solo, that before they even started shooting the first episode. And that kind of became the Penguin theme. And I took what I wrote for that and reorchestrated it for like a string quartet that kind of builds into this more frenzied ensemble piece that by the end is kind of just a little wild feeling. And I really liked the hairiness that you can get with the strings, and starting small too. It's kind of has got this scurrying vibe to it as well, but it's like the string section is, a lot of people think of it as with this elegance, but it also can get kind of weird and hairy and creepy too. So
That's true. I mean, you are literally holding bows with hair on them.
Exactly. Oh, yes, yes, quite literally.
Oh, but that's so interesting psychologically what you're talking about, that the Penguin's theme starts in a moment where he is doing the action that will tip him over into building out all of the things that will shape him into the man that he is today.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some sounds in this series that I actually couldn't really place. And the word I'm going to throw out, which probably sounds horribly inaccurate, is scraping.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So there's a lot of different things that we use. So obviously the string section was a big part of it. But then also behind that, there was a guitarist that I was working with who is really good at creating these ambient textures and effects. And it almost sounds synth-like, but it's got kind of a more imperfect quality to it, and he has all these weird ethereal tones. So blend that with synths that I would put in. Also, a lot of the percussion was trash percussion.
Trash percussion?
Yeah. So
like literally
literal trash. Yeah.
Banging on trash?
Yeah.
Banging on trash, banging on cans of inside the trash, banging on the trash can around the trash.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, literally all of that. I think so. Again, growing up, going to scoring sessions, one of my favorite things to do would be going to sit with the percussionists in the back of the room and just watch what they do, because whatever makes a cool sound, they would take that and they would play with it. So when starting on the Penguin, especially for his theme, which I like to call Scherzo for a Flightless Bird, it starts out with this quartet, but also it's underscored with trash percussion, where I worked with a percussionist and we made a drum kit out of trash cans. So the cymbals were trash lids, the toms was a bucket, the kick drum was just one of those giant metal, old-fashioned looking like Oscar the Grouch cans, and just to really give it kind of like a little bit of an urban vibe to it, kind of a cityness.
I mean, we're talking after everybody has seen episode 7, and there's a moment in here that I really want to talk to you about, which is the fist fight between Oz and Sal.
Motherfucker. What are you doing? Come on, you bastard. Let's go. What are you doing? Come on, let's go. Come on. Come on. Oh, hell no. No. Sal, look at me. Look at me. I beat you, Sal. You hear me? I beat you. I win.
The way you scored that, the pace of that, I really felt their exhaustion.
Yeah, that was actually a really fun scene for me to score, because first off, there's not a whole lot of action scenes, and which can be fun to score as well. So it's fun to kind of lean into that. But so the first version of that I wrote was just kind of this, again, demented version of Oz's theme, just that is with this whine that's just kind of rising throughout the whole thing. And Lauren actually came up with a brilliant idea during one of the reviews. She was like, what if we started slowing down the music with the guys as they're getting more exhausted, to really just emphasize it as like, this is not what they do. They more are making plays from the background. Obviously, it leads to Sal's death. And I remember sitting in the review with her and Matt and just slowing down the tempo, and we were like, oh, wait, this is really cool. This is working. And it was just kind of one of those moments where there's like a smile on everyone's face.
I mean, that makes me really curious, like, what happens when there's a scene where you just feel like the music isn't working? Like, what happens when you get stuck, when your dad gets stuck? How do you work through it?
I remember one of the scenes that I had a lot of conversations with her about as I was writing it was the scene in episode 6 between Eve and Sophia, when Sophia goes to her house, because there's a lot of like subtle little turns in that scene. And I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page with it. And we took an hour and we watched the whole scene. We watched it without music. And then we would kind of place markers where it's like, okay, this line of dialogue right here, this is really signaling a shift in the sequence. And it's like, oh, this is a revelation for Sophia right here. And just talking about how to kind of like walk the line between not being over the top with the music, but also not being so sparse that you're not sure what it's doing. So that was the line that we were balancing on a lot of the show. It was a difficult one to achieve, but it was fun to kind of, during the reviews, to look into like, okay, what sounds are they responding to? What's like, distracting, and find whatever makes that balance work.
Well, like Oz and Francis, you grew up in a house with a lot of music. You fell in love with music. Now I'm wondering, what about silence? When you and your dad are together, can you ever not talk about work?
It's I mean, we definitely talk about work a lot. It's also just a lot of like family talk as well, and like I
Or
actually
gossiping about who has the worst taste in music?
exactly. But my grandfather is currently working through dementia and stuff, so that dominates the conversation a lot. And actually, that was all starting to kind of come up as I was getting into the series, and again looking into Francis and Oz's storyline. There's a lot of, oh yeah, this is a tough situation that he's in with her.
Yeah, is there a sound for that?
Yeah, so actually, Francis's scenes were some of those ones where it's like, the tiniest bit over the line was too much, and just trying to make sure that we're writing that because her performance is so incredible and so real too. And that was actually one of my favorite things about reading the first episode was just that scene between him and his mother where you can see that she's confused, and then the second that he kind of like, it comes out that he's killed Alberto, and she switches, and she just kind of, you're like, oh, I see why this guy is the way he is. Like, she's kind of like, I don't know, his head's a little messed up, and she's kind of fueling this like desire. So that's what kind of led to Oz's ambition theme, which was also used as a theme for Francis. It is really kind of a way to be like, his ambition comes from her.
Mick, it has been so nice to get to chat with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Next, we'll be speaking with sound editors Andy Kris and Rich Bologna and our special effects supervisor, Devin Maggio. Welcome. We are very eager to hear everything that you guys have put into the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's start by telling the people out there exactly what each of you do. Let's start with you guys, Andy and Rich.
Rich and I are both the re-recording mixers. I specifically do the dialogue and music, and Rich does the sound effects. So that means at the end of the process, we're left to put the mix together that everybody hears when they watch the show on when the show airs.
And so I, on the Penguin, served as re-recording mixer, as Andy said, and then I also co-supervised the sound editing with Larry Zibb.
Okay, so if Andy does mostly dialogue and Rich does mostly effects, where does screaming fit in? Which one of you handles screaming?
Actually, that's one of the things that both of us handle in some way or the other. Screams are kind of considered either dialogue or sound effects. It's one of those rare things that straddle both worlds.
Yeah, I think on this show, probably Andy handled, the lion's share of screams, but I definitely had some on my side as well. Or if it's like more kind of, closer proximity to the action, that's probably going to be on Andy's side, but I'll do, more kind of, medium level and distant screams and stuff like that.
And they might not be coming from humans either, some of those screams, if Rich comes up with them there.
Okay, I see your game, Rich. What about you, Devin?
So my job on the show is to deal with the practical effects. So we, deal with anything that needs to be practical, that we also work with the VFX department or the stunt department to build the rigs or the gags that we need to accomplish, depending on what the script calls for.
How soon do you get involved, like working on a show like The Penguin? I mean, where do you start when they call you up and say, hey, are you interested in working on the show?
I would say they probably bring us on a couple months earlier. We start with reading the script, and then we start kind of going to the creative side of, how do we want to make these effects become reality? So then we sit down with the art department as well as the producers and really kind of start dialing in. And then it becomes like a testing process of R&D and building the rigs that we need to build to be able to get videos to show them so we can get in a better place for when we are on set. So it's more exactly what they want.
I want to hear more about that. Like, when you first signed up to this show, what was an early Gotham City challenge that you had to figure out, something that took a lot of R&D?
For example, for the explosion side, when the whole tunnel explodes, we need to put camera, we need to put the actors and the stunt performers in a safe position that we can still do the explosion practical. So we ended up building, a hallway at my shop that would mimic what we were going to do on set, and making sure that we were able to have enough explosion, but at the same point still have people in a safe position to get the effect. So that was multiple tests that we did, and using different pieces, whether it was ratcheting doors off the tunnel himself, then it's the fireball, and then it's a lot that goes into it. But that was just like one challenge, right then and there.
So it's like this explosion, this amount of explosives is too small, this amount of explosives is too big.
Correct.
So it's not always like the bigger the better.
Well, no. I mean, you would like to think that, but unfortunately, no. Because obviously, if we go too big, it whites all the cameras out and you get nothing. So you need to be able to still give them a big enough explosion without taking away from the actual what you're viewing on the camera.
And I think this is such an interesting conversational pairing, getting to sit down with the three of you guys, because I'm hearing Devin makes the things actually practically happen. Rich and Andy, I was really struck by how much in this show is captured by sound only, no visuals. Our first impressions of Arkham were all sounds. Like, we were looking at this kind of simple shot of Sophia, but it was these unseen noises, screams outside her cell that were really horrible.
For Arkham, I think that definitely for the sound crew was a real highlight, just because there is so much happening with the sound that you can't even really register on screen. From the sound effects side, we did a lot of wild stuff. Like, our sound designer, Larry Zipp, had some recordings from, I think, the Bronx Zoo or somewhere in New York, where there was a very agitated sea otter. And he kind of used tastefully a way to incorporate that into the sound design of Arkham, in that whenever we're going down a hallway or in the cell, we'll introduce this slowed down sound effect of a very scary sounding sea otter, and it just kind of adds to the sort of pedigree of awfulness of that environment. And there's some babies that are slowed down crying that sound like really horrific women screaming in the distance. So it was definitely fun for us to kind of like build that world up in a terrifying way.
It's never occurred to me that a sea otter could be scary.
I mean, that was definitely a surprisingly terrifying sound. You wouldn't think they're very cute animals, but they sound, if they're not in a good, I don't know if it was in heat or something, but it was a nightmare of a sound.
Well, Devin, I want to hear a little bit more from you about what in this show is real practical special effects versus VFX. I mean, I would love to just even maybe have you pick something out that you worked on that audiences might be surprised was a practical effect.
What's kind of cool about what we do is that if it's not 100% practical, we still also work with visual effects that kind of, give them elements that they can build off of. Like the whole drug lab was a couple different builds. There was one that we did inside the Bronx, and there's another one that we ended up doing inside like Brooklyn, and bringing that all together with the actual smoke and all the gags of the chemicals that are supposed to give you the look that that's what's growing the actual drug itself.
Oh, that's true. I never thought about that. Like the idea of filling the air so that it feels like it is a place where mushrooms could grow.
Correct. So that was between like set dressing and VFX and then ourselves to give you that look that we're in an actual grow factory and we're producing these mushrooms.
How do you decide what is going to be practical versus what is going to be visual effects?
Well, I think that's the creative side. I think that's when we actually sit down and we have a conversation with, the director and the DP and then the producers, and we kind of figure out how we can accomplish this. Maybe the whole thing is practical, or maybe that there's just parts of what we're trying to do that are practical, and then visual effects will come in and we'll give them elements to build off. But I think it really comes down to time and money, because obviously we're always up against a tight timeline. So some of these builds may not be able to be built in time of what they're trying to do. So I think it's a little bit of what we have the time for and the location, and that's kind of what I believe, at least from my dealings.
Well, so let's get into this episode in particular. I mean, Andy, I was thinking in this episode 7, that one of the most powerful moments is your use of silence. We're hearing Oz's brothers cry for help from the sewer, and then we don't hear them anymore.
I think when you're dealing with sound, the lack of sound can be something, pretty terrifying. That whole opening with the brothers was something we worked a long time on because, there was a time it's like, how much do you want to hear the brothers suffering? How much do you, and I think Lauren was always into pushing the limits of like, how much can you possibly take of the cruelty until it's like enough. And she was really good about going right up to the end. I mean, I remember a few late nights working on that particular sequence when we dove into a bunch of, the actors came in and did some ADR, and we kind of listened to all of the takes and just found the most terrifying, like horrible stuff that we, put in. And it was fun. I mean, there was one time where we were just like laughing because it was like, it seemed so over the top, and then we played it back and she's like, no, that's the vibe I'm going after, because I want the audience to feel, my God, what a horrible thing Oz just did to his brothers, and like really hammer that home. So she was pretty good about pushing us in maybe a way that I'd be like, oh, I think that's a little too much. But she's like, no, we can never go too far on this kind of stuff.
Are you telling me you have a threshold for hearing kids scream that Lauren LeFranc does not?
I told her, I was like, I've never had more fun killing kids in my whole life. So thank you for this opportunity.
Just to piggyback on what Andy was saying, I think there was a couple iterations on the scene of the brothers dying, and I think we got to where we needed to be, where I think there was sort of a last minute ad of screaming with water coming into your lungs.
That's right.
I think that was the one
awful.
Missing layer that Lauren was looking for. And it was kind of twisted in that, Lauren is such a sweet person and very nice to work with, but then whenever she would start kind of giggling to herself, we knew that we had gotten it right, and it was some of the most horrific stuff of the episode, and that was kind of our indicator that I was like, okay, good, we're in a good place.
Well, one thing that I really loved about this giant explosion at the end of this episode is the way that you use sound to put the audience in Oz's kind of internal point of view as he's like stumbling around the wreckage, like the ringing of the ears, the kind of dissonance between like what we're hearing and the movements on screen. And then boom, that moment where like he clears his ears, all the sounds of the ruined city just rush in. And that might be maybe my favorite sound moment of this entire episode, but I kind of want to hear from really everybody. What is a detail that you did in this series that you're just really particularly proud of, that how it came together, you really think that audiences should give it a little bit of special appreciation? Andy, I'll start with you.
I think that sequence is something we are pretty proud of, because it's not something we're asked to do often, where you're being asked to get into a character's head and then put the character in the environment. 99% of the work we do is very practical. You see people talking on camera, you hear them talking in the cleanest way possible. And that's a moment where visually there's been a big explosion, and then Lauren asked us to, go into Oz's head here, and then they did shoot it so that when he snaps his fingers, the whole world rushes back in. So, I think for us, we have a lot of sounds that we wrangle. There's score, there's the backgrounds, there's the screaming, there's the tinnitus sound. And in order to weave all that in a way that Lauren says that this is how we're telling the story here, and to get it to the point where it's fun and also makes the audience go like, oh, I get it. The whole world comes back to him at that one moment. So that was a great moment for us.
What about you, Rich?
For me, I had a really fun time, and you guys can correct me about the actual episode. I think it was in episode 1, Andy, where Oz and Sophia are at the mansion, and there's the car that comes in, and Sophia's brother is dead inside. Was that episode 1?
Yeah, that's
episode 1.
But that one was, I think it was a really great example of kind of everybody, really working on a high level, because, you know, we had conceived something before the mix, which I think was working well, but it's a lot going on, and you know, Matt Reeves and Lauren had a very specific thing that they wanted to try to do, which is this internalized thing where the off-screen car crashes, and we're cutting back and forth, and Sophia walks up to the car only to find her dead brother. And there's a really beautiful moment where it kind of all, the sound sort of just all goes internalized, and all you're hearing is this weird kind of horn that's continuing from the car crash. And then it eloquently hands off to this really beautiful score that the Giacchinos did. You know, it all came together very fast, but I was very proud of how that scene all kind of came together in the end, you know.
And what about you, Devin? I mean, bonus points if it's not an explosion, because I feel like when I see explosion now, I'm going to know that's you. But what's something that I wouldn't know is something you did?
I mean, look, we did a lot of really cool things that myself and the team are definitely proud of throughout the entire show. One of the things that I really loved was the fact of the continuity of what it looked like going through. I mean, we had rain everywhere, and that gave that dark and that dreary look, and the roads were always wet. And then we got into the snow, and it was that snow dressing, and it was always that dirty, grungy snow, that you know, that Gotham look. It was really cool. So I mean, like, I think it was a really well put together project, and we are very proud of it.
Wow. Well, Andy, Rich, Devin, thank you so much for joining us. I promise I will never look at a sea otter the same way again.
Thanks, Amy.
Oz has promised to restore dignity to Crown Point, to resurrect it from the Riddler's destruction. Instead, his choices and Sophia's counters hammer the people of this neighborhood with even more devastation. How much more pain are Oz and Sophia willing to inflict on those around them to settle their power struggle once and for all? We're about to find out, because next week is the finale. Stream the finale of The Penguin Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern, and then join me and the creators, creatives, cast, and crew to conclude this season. This was an OBB Sound production and hosted by me, Amy Nicholson. Executive producers for OBB Sound are Michael D. Ratner, Scott Ratner, Arlen Konopaki, and Elias Tanner. Produced by Toby Lawless. Production manager is Brian Burgett. Engineered by Josh Falcon. Our editor and mixer is also Josh Falcon. Booking coordinator is Tess Bartholomew. Research producer is Jesse Holland. Executive producers for HBO are Becky Rowe and Savon Slater. Executives in charge of production for DC are Mike Pilata and Victor Diaz.